Hello, thank you for stopping by. My name is Becky and this is BecxReadz, and today I want to share with you every single book I've ever given 6 stars to. I will actually have the video linked down below where I explain how I rate books and my rating system if you want to check that out. I will say that within like the last 5 years, I've become a lot more generous with my 6-star ratings, and I don't know if that's just because I've been reading more books or if I've just been enjoying more of the books that I'm reading. I really don't know. The very first book I ever gave 6 stars to, I think it was back in 2012 when I read this, and it is a young adult dystopian, and that is Devastation by Shandy L. Kurth. So this is a YA dystopian in which America is at war with a very unlikely country, and these group of kids have to try and get to a safe zone within the country. And along the way, people are just dying left and right. Like, out of all of the dystopians I've ever read, this one got 6 stars from me. I just thought it was so unique. Like, yeah, it's war. That's not unique in a dystopian. But the way that Shandy L. Kurth just wrote these characters really just tugged at me, and I connected to every single perspective that was in this story. Even perspectives of characters who were on the bad side, I still felt such a strong emotional connection to them. And I absolutely loved it. It is written in very short chapters where each chapter you get a different perspective and you get to see where they are at, so you can sort of map their journey on an actual map of America and see where they come together. I will say it doesn't have a lot of like in-depth character development. You don't really get to know these characters all that much. It's pretty much an action story in a war zone where you are just watching these characters try to survive. It almost felt like a movie to me. And I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was other than the fact that I loved the characters and I loved the unique setup of this war that was going on. It just blew my freaking mind. I loved the sequel as well. What I hate about this series, though, is that it's still not finished. When? When am I going to get the 3rd book in this series? I don't know. But this was the one that started my 6-star rating. Next up is one that I've talked about recently a lot on my channel, and that is 4 Years Trapped in My Mind Palace by Johann Twist. So this is a literary fiction about a 14-year-old boy named Aaron who has, I think he got meningitis, and so that put him into a coma. So he's completely paralyzed. And his parents are going through a tough time, so they end up moving him to this nursing home where he becomes the roommate to this old man named Solomon who has Alzheimer's. And everybody thinks that Aaron is just there. He's just a vegetable pretty much, but he is aware of what's going on around him. He can't see it and he can't communicate, but he can hear what's going on. So when he gets moved into this nursing home, somehow when Solomon goes to sleep and he has memories of his past life and his youth, it pulls Aaron into his dreams, and Aaron is able to live out historic events through Solomon's life that he's never been able to experience because he's pretty much been paralyzed and in a coma for so much of his life. And in doing so, Solomon is able to express to the people around him what Aaron is thinking. And it is such a heartbreaking yet moving story. It has a great platonic friendship, an unlikely friendship between this young boy and this old man. I loved this book so much that I actually gifted signed copies to multiple people in my life. That is how much I loved this book, because I've never done that before. And every person who I gifted a copy of this to who read it, they thoroughly enjoyed it as well. The cover might lack something. It might not draw you in, but I implore you, please, 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 if you don't read any other book in this video, please give this a try. Especially if you like historical fiction, if you like literary fiction, if you like disability rep, if you like chronic illness rep, if you want just a good, feel-good, tug at your emotions story, please read this book. Another book that just broke me. I think I recommended it in my Books That Made Me Cry video. And that is The Fog Within by Nick Shamhart. You will see a theme that most of the books that I give 6 stars tend to be indie published. There are some trad pubs in here, but for the most part, I tend to really enjoy indie published books. So in this, we are following Megan, and Megan has autism. So we are following 3 sections of her life: her childhood, her adolescent, and her adult years. And it's just her story of how she grows up with autism, living with what she calls the fog. And people around her can't see and can't feel the things she feels when she's in this fog. But her relationship with her father is what really cements this book. You follow their relationship as this big teddy bear of a man who everybody's afraid of, literally does anything and everything he can to make Megan's life the best it can be. And we see her experience first love, we see her experience her first job, we just see her experience all these poignant moments in life as somebody with autism. And what makes this book really great and why I recommend it so hard is because the author himself has a nonverbal autistic daughter who he based this story on. He makes it a note to say that this isn't a reflection of his daughter because this will never be his daughter's life, but it's what he would hope it could be. And the scenes in this book, there were a couple that just broke me to tears. There's a scene with a spoon, y'all. A spoon. Had me sobbing. Had me freaking sobbing. And this is another one that anybody who I've gotten to read it, they've all enjoyed it. The next one I have to recommend to you is a middle grade, and that is All the Impossible Things by Lindsay Lackey. This is the story of a young girl named Red who has this ability that when she gets upset, she has this power to control the wind. And nobody knows this except for her. And so when something happens and she ends up in the foster care system, she puts a lot of the blame on herself. She thinks that it's because of this ability that her family's life was pretty much turned upside down and she ended up in these situations. So she doesn't have a lot of trust in people. She's been shuffled from one foster home to the next. And when she ends up at this foster family who owns sort of like this roadside petting zoo, she really starts to come out of her shell. And she starts to realize what true family is and what unconditional love means. This is a book, again, that made me freaking sob. A lot of the books on this list I've cried over, okay? It's just if a book can make me sob, it usually gets 6 stars. But this did it. I cried so much over what Red felt and how she took on so much internal responsibility for the lives of her mother and the people around her. And she really tries to think about all the impossible things in life that have become possible. And that's what gets her through her life, and that's what keeps her going, is her grandma and her would play this game of list off some things that people always thought were impossible. And that's where the title comes in. If you're looking for a feel-good middle grade that has some foster care rep in it, I highly recommend this one. Next up is a contemporary romance, and that is Hawthorne and Heathcliff by R.K. Riles, another indie pub. So in this, we are following Hawthorne. She's living a tough life. Again, it made me freaking cry, okay? Her parents abandoned her and they left her with her uncle, and so she's grown up in his care. She has a lot of trust issues because she thinks if she gets close to somebody, they're going to leave her. And this doesn't really help that her uncle is suffering through some sickness, and so he's on the verge of passing too. So it's not really helping her in this situation. But in her last year of high school, she meets this boy who she dubs Heathcliff. He ends up doing some home repair for her uncle's house. And over the summer, they get to know each other, and she learns to trust again. She learns to welcome somebody into her life. And then they graduate and they go their separate ways, but something brings them back together. So I thought this was a very unique romance because for about 70% of it, it is a young adult romance. And then for the last 30%, it's actually an adult romance. So it spans quite a few years. And the thing that made it 6 stars was, of course, the fact that I cried. But I cried because this book explores a lot about grief and how we deal with grief. And at the time that I first read this, I was grieving very hard. So the things that Hawthorne was feeling and thinking, I could relate to very much. But on reread, I still cried like a freaking baby. So I don't know what that tells you. It tells you that it's a sad book. If any of that fits your bill, check this out. My next one that I gave 6 stars is a book that I don't know if I would give it 6 stars if I reread it. A lot of these books I have rated 6 stars and then I've reread and I'm like, yes, still 6 stars. But this one it's questionable, but I'm gonna throw it in here because I did give it 6 stars, and that is Anatomy: A Love Story by Dana Schwartz. In this, we're following Hazel. She lives in Edinburgh in the 1800s, I believe, and she's wanting to become a physician, but she's a woman, and women don't have a lot of rights in that time. So she dresses up as a boy and she sneaks into this physician college where she can learn anatomy. However, she's found out and they kick her out. But her professor tells her if she can pass the exam without actually coming to his classes, then she can get her physician's certificate. So in order to do this, she gets the help from Jack, who is a grave robber. He will bring her corpses and she will study them that way. So the reason this got 6 stars, it didn't make me cry. For once, a book did not make me cry. This book had me in a chokehold. I started it and I could not put it down. It gave me anxiety like no book has ever given me. Like, I was shaking reading this book by the time I got done with it. That's how invested I was in this story. It was a really unique thing for me because I don't love dark academia. But this is a gothic dark academia that I freaking loved. I loved the morbidity of it. And while this title is a love story, I will say there's not a lot of romance in this book. The romance really doesn't even kick in until like the last third of the book is when we actually meet the love interest. And it is insta-love too, which is something I hate. But these two end up kissing in a literal grave. And that just appealed to my dark, morbid little soul. It just had a lot of things that I don't like. And I think that's why it got 6 stars, is because I didn't like a lot of these tropes and a lot of these plot devices, but somehow this did it for me. And like I said, if I reread it now, I don't know if I would give it that same rating. Because I read the sequel to this book and absolutely hated the sequel. Gave it like 2 stars. Would not recommend. If you're going to read this series, I just think you need to read this one and stop. Just take it as a standalone. Yeah, it got 6 stars for me just because it messed with me. Yeah. Up next is one of my favorite alien romances ever, and that is I Married a Naga by Regine Abel. So if you know, I started reading this series just for fun because the titles and the covers are ridiculous. But oh boy, did I fall in love with this series. So in this book, we're following Serena, who is a human. She is a hunter. She goes to these different planets and she enters these hunting competitions to sort of weed out the predators. And she ends up on Zero's planet, where he is the snake man, but she's told not to cross a certain barrier into the snake people's territory, otherwise they will kill her. Well, something happens and she ends up crossing that barrier, and so in order to save her life, she is put into an arranged marriage with Zaro so that she can stay on this planet and live with him. But she only has to do this for 6 months, so she is very much of the mindset that, okay, I'm just gonna, live the best I can here, and in 6 months I'm out of here. But Zero here, he is a man of his word, and he is like, I've promised to love you and cherish you and protect you to my gods, to my people, and I'm gonna do that. So he sets out to woo her the strongest way he can, and he is like, I'm gonna make her love me so much she's not gonna want to leave. This man is so swoony. Like, who knew a snake man could be so swoony? I didn't know that at all. But he set me down the path of finding other snake men, and nobody's compared to him yet. Nobody has. I love him so much. I will say I've heard some criticisms of this book of Serena. She's not the best companion. She doesn't really give it her all. She's not willing to put in as much as Zero, and I can understand that. I see that, but I don't care. This book made me laugh. It made me cry. It made me horny. It gave me all the feels, and so for that, it got 6 stars. And I highly recommend it if you're looking for some alien romance, if you're looking for some Snake Man action. Zero's the man. We're up to another popular book, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. So this is the story of Linus Baker. He is a very straight-laced, follow-the-rule kind of guy, and he is sent to this orphanage where these very dangerous kids live, and he is there to assess whether or not this orphanage should remain open. When he gets there, he discovers that they're not following the rules and all this, But these kids are just kids. They're different, but they just want to be loved and accepted for who they are. And while he's there, he ends up falling in love with these kids and the kids' foster dad, and realizing that maybe life doesn't need to be followed by the rules 100%. Maybe you can have fun every now and then. And maybe you can just accept people for their flaws and insecurities and differences. And it was just such a heartwarming story. I tell you what, I've heard very few people not like this book. Very few. Like, there are some, but very few. Most everybody who reads this book has loved it, and I was just one of them. Put me on the hype train with everybody else. I loved this freaking book. If you want to laugh, if you want to cry, if you want to feel good, this is it. I listened to the audiobook, and the audio was really well narrated as well. So if you haven't read this book yet, I suggest listening to the audio. Next is another middle grade, and it is a middle grade sci-fi, and that is The Last Quintista by Donna Barba Higuera. So this one, again, it made me cry. It made me sob. This is the story of Petra, whose family is supposed to be one of few families to board this spaceship and go colonize a new planet because a meteor is about to hit Earth and kill everybody on Earth. Her and her younger brother are put into stasis, and they're supposed to be fed this information while they're in stasis of all the things that they're supposed to learn and know, so that when they get to this new planet, they will have all this information. They're supposed to be fed like information about history of Earth and plant life and science and mathematics and all this stuff. But something happens and bad people take over this ship, and they cut off all this information from these kids in stasis, and they start just feeding them propaganda. They only give them the information that they want them to know because they want them to be clean slates. They don't want them to know anything about Earth. But that's where Petra's heritage comes from. She remembers so much of the stories her grandma taught her and told her about life way before she was born. And so she wakes up and she's the only person who has any of that knowledge left in her. And she wants to preserve that. So she starts telling herself the stories that her grandmother told her so she doesn't forget. And when these other kids start hearing her, they just think they're bedtime stories, and so she starts telling them that. And her mission is to just get off this spaceship because she believes that there's another spaceship that's already landed, and she wants to warn the people, and she wants to find these other people. And in doing so, she learns some sad information about her family, and this really pushes her to get the other kids to safety. And the thing that just broke me down about this book was the relationship between Petra and her younger brother. It was so freaking sad. For it being marketed as a middle grade, I actually found it in the young adult section. I would say like a lower young adult, but it still felt more young adult than middle grade to me. And I just highly recommend this if you're looking for a very unique, very diverse science fiction story that'll touch your heart. Next up is my favorite series ever. All 3 books got 6 stars for me, and that is the Wraith King series by Grace Draven. In these first 2 books, we are following Brishan and Ildiko. Ildiko is a human, and Brishan is a Kai warrior. He's got gray skin, claws, he's not human. And they need to form an alliance between their 2 countries, so they are put into an arranged marriage. They're both very low in their family's hierarchy, so they don't think it's just gonna be a marriage of convenience for alliances. But when they travel back to his kingdom to finally make a life for themselves, they get to know each other slowly. And while they're repulsed by one another, they find each other incredibly ugly, and the banter that they have between one another is so lighthearted, and it's just so real that I fell in love with them so hard. I loved their relationship. It was so mature. They talked about their problems. They trusted one another, and through them getting to know one another, attraction develops, and it develops so good, okay? The first book is more relationship, character dynamics. It doesn't have the strongest plot, and the world building isn't the best. That kicks in really hard in Eidolon. Their relationship develops even more. They go through some trials and tribulations to really work on their relationship, and you see the world expanded a lot more. And then we get to book 3, and book 3 follows different characters. It follows Saravek and Anaset. Anaset is Brishan's cousin. She is also the captain of his guards, pretty much. So some events from the second book lead Saravek to have to take this priest to his homeland to be buried. And Anaset offers to be sort of the guide for their traveling party. And Saravek has always been attracted to Aniset. He's made it known, but he's a human and she finds him repulsive, or she tells herself that anyway. And so she just doesn't understand his appeal for her. But on their journey, oh boy, these two develop an attraction, let me tell you. She finally comes around, folks. It takes her a long time, but she finally comes around and she finally sees Saravek in a new light, and their relationship is just so good, so good. I fucking loved this one. I loved it just as much as I loved these two. There is a scene in this book with a hair ribbon. Oh my god. Random items in books, people. I don't know why they make me cry, but a scene with a hair ribbon had me crying. So, if you're looking for a very unique fantasy romance, definitely check out this series. And don't stop at just book one. Oh, no. You need to read the other 2 books as well, because they're just as freaking fantastic. One of my most recent 6 stars was from last year, and it is A Daughter of the Trolls by Mackenzie Catron. This is an upper young adult cozy fantasy horror. That's how I describe it, because it's cozy fantasy, but it's got some horror elements to it. It makes me think of like Grimm fairy tales is what I got from it. But in this, we are following 19-year-old Sparrow. She lives in this magical glen with her mother. She is bound to a wheelchair, and she helps her mother the best way she can to protect the creatures of this glen from this very evil witch called Black Annis. But one day, this witch invades the glen, and she slaughters pretty much everybody, and she takes a few people to her cave to use as playthings. So Sparrow has to set out on a journey through these magical woods with her childhood friend Rush. And she really has to trust him to help her along the way, because this forest isn't set up and built for her wheelchair. So she learns to trust him even more. She learns some things that he's been keeping from her. They develop the sweetest relationship. There's no spice in this book, but their chemistry is so good. And the magic that is in here is so whimsical. And the way that this author wrote this forest setting was so fucking good. I could just easily imagine it. This does have a very authentic disability rep. The author herself uses a wheelchair, and I just really enjoyed seeing that represented in a fantasy novel in which her disability isn't magically changed by the end of it. So if that sounds like anything that appeals to you, I highly, highly recommend this one. Another recent one is, again, one that I don't know if I would give it 6 stars upon reread, but the first time I read it, it got 6 stars. And that is Ledge by Stacey McEwen. So in this, we are following Dawson, who has grown up on this icy prison ledge. At some point in life, these winged folk named the Galatians, they plucked a bunch of humans from the human land and put them on this ledge, and they used them as human sacrifices. They throw them into this pool that sucks out their soul, and then they drink from it to really replenish their magic. So this life on this icy ledge is all Dawson's known. So she grows up trying to evade when they come in to try and pick off human sacrifices. And one day she just can't evade them any longer. It's her turn and she gets picked to be a sacrifice. But Dawson isn't your mild-mannered meat girl. She has grown up to survive. She is a killer. She will literally chop your head off given the chance. So instead of just submitting and going along to be a sacrifice, she takes the option of letting them hunt her. They release her down this very dangerous mountain, and they're like, if you can make it to the bottom, to the human lands, you're free to live your life. Her chances are very slim until she gets the unlikely help of Ryan, who is a half Galatian. And through that, they learn some surprising facts about the human lands that might tie into Dawson and her lineage. So the reason that this got 6 stars is pretty much the same reason that Anatomy, a Love Story got 6 stars. This book had me hooked. I could not put it down. I was thumbing the pages so fast, and I was so invested in the relationship dynamics, the adventure, the action. I just could not put it down. It didn't make me cry. It didn't make me laugh. I was just tense. I was tense and I was edgy and I was anxious. So would I give it 6 stars now, knowing all I know about the book and how it goes? I don't know. I would have to reread it to find out. But it got 6 stars in the moment. and I thought it was a really unique fantasy romance. These last few books are all books that I've given 6 stars just this year in 2023. So the first book that I gave 6 stars to this year was Master of Storms by Beck McMaster. So this is the 5th book in the Legends of the Storm series. I swear I just need like I need a post that I can post to describe this, because I feel like every freaking video I've done this year, I've told you what this book is about. And I can't help it, y'all. I can't help it. I love this book. Once again, let me just tell you what it's about. In this series, we are following dragon shifter siblings who are trying to overthrow their evil mother from the throne and take it back for themselves. So each book follows a different sibling as they find their mate, and the overall arching plot is them trying to overthrow their mother. In the 5th book, we follow Marduk, who is one of the Drucky brothers. He is sent to this other kingdom to secure an alliance through a mating bond with one of the sisters who lives there. And he ends up choosing Solveig, and they have a little bonding moment, and then he just leaves. He doesn't tell her goodbye, he doesn't explain, he just ghosts her. So she is pissed because she is a kick-ass woman, and how dare this man just leave her? Just leave her? Oh, hell no. So she is out for revenge. She tries to track his ass down to kill him. That's her goal. But when she finds him, they end up having to pretend like they are in this strong, unbreakable union, because her territory needs to form an alliance with a different territory. And in order to do that, they all have to pretend like they're a strong unit. And when they're pretending to do this, she realizes that there's a reason why he left, and she's also realizing that there's a reason why she feels more in this relationship than he does. And this book made me laugh. It made me cry. It made me swoon. I loved these characters. I loved their relationship dynamics. I loved how they were with one another. It was amazing. It was amazing. They are my favorite couple within this entire series, and I just highly recommend it. It's in every video I do, pretty much, so cannot recommend it enough. The next 2 books I rated 6 stars this year are both part of the same series, and that is Twisted Love and Twisted Games by Anna Wong. In Twisted Love, we are following Ava and Alex. Ava is a college student, and her brother is very protective of her, so when he sets out on like a doctor's mission or whatever, he asks Alex to keep an eye on his little sister. So he moves in next door to Ava, and he keeps an eye on her. Let me tell you, he is possessive AF. And she goes about this way of trying to bring out his emotions, because he's a very stoic guy. So through this, they start to get closer. They start to form a relationship. And then she finds out why exactly he was so willing to do it. The reason this gets 6 stars for me is I listened to the audiobook. I could not put the audiobook down. I could not. I listened to it in one go. Like, I never stopped listening to it. I loved the character dynamics. I loved the forced proximity. I loved the possessive alpha male. I loved the smut. The smut, y'all. The smut itself just got like 4 stars, just that, you know? So by the time I added everything else on top of it that I liked, I was like, well, shit, I gotta give this book 6 stars. Did it make me cry? No. It did make me laugh. And it did make me horny. So, you know, it brought out some emotion in me, y'all. And I loved it so much. And then we get to Twisted Games, and I was thinking Twisted Love was a 6-star book. How can I like a book more than that? Well, baby, did I ever. Did I ever. This follows Reese and Bridget. Bridget is the princess to her kingdom, and Reese is her bodyguard. And she's just happy to be like a dignitary for her country until something happens and she has to return to be an acting queen. But she's slowly formed a relationship with Reese, and she can't be in a relationship with him as a queen. She has to be in a relationship with somebody of noble blood. He does not have that. But something happens, and while Reese has been sort of distant from her, he's attracted to her, he's built this friendship with her, but he is her bodyguard, and he doesn't want to cross that line. And then something tips him over that line, and he's like, fuck it, that line doesn't exist anymore. And he becomes, again, this possessive alpha hero who doesn't care about the rules, and he's like, you're mine. You're not going to be anybody else's. You're mine. And oh my ever-loving God, y'all. Again, the audiobook, the smut. Hello. Yeah. Your girl couldn't put it down. Once again, made me laugh and made me Horny. It made me horny, okay? I don't think I need to be ashamed to say this book just did it for me on so many fucking levels. Jesus Christ. I'm not fanning myself because this book was just so high. It's just really hot today and I don't have my AC on. But again, this book was really freaking hot, so it got 6 stars. And I'm not ashamed to admit that one of the main reasons was it just made me horny. You know, sometimes that just be the way it be. Okay, the last book and my most recent 6 star of the year, this year, our current year, 2023. Why I felt the need to clarify that so hard, is The Teeth in the Tide by Rebecca F. Kinney. This book blew me out of the freaking water, okay? It was such a unique mermaid story. So in this, we are following Kestra, who lives on this isolated island that is surrounded by deadly and murderous merfolk. Her father used to be somebody who patched up the wall that surrounds this island and keeps all the people safe, until one day he fell off of it and the mermaids ate him and killed him. So she wants revenge on these mermaids. She wants them all dead. The only person who is willing to traverse these deadly waters to come to their island to trade with them and bring them goods is this Captain Flay. And he and Kestra have built a relationship. And on this journey, he is trying to convince her to leave the island with him because he wants to get her somewhere where she can actually have a life. But she tells him that the only way she will do this is if her family can come with her, and in order to do that, they have to kill all the mermaids. So she convinces him to go out and capture a mermaid and bring it back so her cousin can experiment on it, find its weaknesses, and try and find a way to kill these merfolk. Meanwhile, we also get the perspective of Rake, who is a merman in the Mer Society. He is only used for breeding. He's been very sexually, mentally, emotionally, physically abused throughout his whole life. And he's wanting to get out of this world. And he always sees Flay's ship go through their waters, and he wonders what it would be like to be human. But he doesn't really do anything to make this situation happen until the queens present him with one of his sons that he didn't know he had. And they want him to raise his son to be a breeder, to, you know, have his lot in life. But Rake does not want this for his son. He does not want his son to be used and abused the way he has. So he seeks out this entity to try and find a way to get free of this. In doing so, he ends up having to steal this ancient Mer technology that will grant him legs. And he ends up on the surface, and the first person he meets is Kestra, the woman who wants all Mer dead. It was so unique. First of all, the Mer perspective is a merman. He's also a single father, and he is doing whatever he has to do to give his son a better life. And just that dynamic alone tugged at my freaking heart. I was like, oh my God. I also really appreciated that this book did not take the cliche route that most romances take. It's not a why choose. It's not a love triangle. The romance you think would develop isn't the romance you get. And I fucking loved that. I loved that this book was just so unique. I loved the seafaring adventures. I loved sort of the sci-fi element to it and the Mer magic and the hierarchy within the Mer world. It takes the characters' perspectives that were given and it just throws away all of your expectations of what you would normally find in a romance book. And if you're looking for a unique Mer fantasy romance, I highly recommend you give this a shot because it was just so freaking good. Those are all the books I've ever given 6 stars to in my entire reading life. Let me know down in the comments, have you read any of these? Have I convinced you to read any of them? And if you don't feel like commenting any of that but want to let me know that you made it to the end of this video, could you leave me just the number 6? Just the number 6, please. And until my next video, thank you so much for watching and go out there and find a 6-star read for me. Bye.